Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. This is our last broadcast before the U.S. presidential election. Well, we're recording right now on the afternoon of Friday, November 2nd. It's All Souls. Yesterday was All Saints. Time to think about posterity. And time to get a copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. That's available at progressivepress.com, progressivepress.com. Get a copy now. Ebook available for as little as $6. Go for it while there's still time. Educate people. You don't want to test this out on your own flesh. We've had some interesting events this week. There's an interview with Maria Heller, a very influential commentator on the radio. She's a very influential reviewer on Amazon. She's been very kind to this book, regards it as the one must-read before the presidential election. You can find that at Maria's website, and it'll be up at tarpley.net. By the time you hear this, it will be up. So thank you to Maria Heller. And we also had our event at the National Press Club on Wednesday evening on Halloween. We had the McClendon Group, founded by Sarah McClendon, the late Sarah McClendon, and still going strong. And a packed McClendon room was the outcome of this, and very interesting discussion. And we even had a Mormon present. Somebody, I don't know who he was. He said he was a Mormon historian who came there by chance. Yes, by chance, I'm sure. Just happened to be there. Came from Salt Lake City by chance. He objected to what I was saying, and he gave the usual lame excuse that polygamy was a response to depopulation, right, because of the atrocities of the damned Americans. And, of course, this doesn't hold water because there were always more men than women in the Mormon community. So instituting polygamy simply meant condemning a large part of the male population to a bachelorhood, meaning you can't get really into heaven. If you're not married, you get neutered when you arrive, and then you can be in heaven but as a servant. But he put up the usual Mormon line on that. Mountain Meadows Massacre. This was asked by one of the participants in the debate, and on the Mountain Meadows Massacre, the story was that it was a couple of Mormons got dressed up as Indians and decided to kill all the people from Arkansas because in Missouri, some of those same people had taken part in harassing and killing the Mormons, 15 years earlier. It's from 18... It's practically a decade, right? It's 20 years. It's from 1837 to 1857. So it's 20 years earlier. Notice this constant obsession with revenge and killing and armed force, which, of course, in Christianity, whatever it looks like in practice, in theory, it can have no weight. So this guy looked for all the world like Joel Skousen. I don't know where Joel Skousen was that night, but this guy sure looked like him with a bald head and glasses, and he said he was a Mormon historian. So that was a highly interesting discussion. That tape, we're fortunate that it was taped, and that will also be up at tarpley.net if you want to see what went down at the National Press Club on Wednesday evening. And the bottom line is get your copy of Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. Just Too Weird, the Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. And, of course, racism. Let's not forget that. If you're a woman, it's polygamy. If you're black or brown, it's racism. The sons of Ham don't get in. And if you're a Lamanite, much harder to get in. So we're thinking under Romney, the coins may say, in Elohim we trust. No more in God we trust. It'll be in Elohim we trust. And it'll be in the oath, so help me Elohim. And if it's not clear who that is, it's Elohim of Kolob, I guess, the ruler of at least this part of the universe, although not of the whole thing, because that would be authoritarian. So, and of course, the system is oligarchical. The election is now upon us, and we'll talk to you about the various considerations in this election. But let's look first at the hurricane. I was then in New York, right? We had the United Front Against Austerity meeting last Saturday in New York City. I'll give you a detailed report about that later in the program. Very successful, many organizations represented. We hope very much in the course of this program to give you a report from one of the main participants in this United Front effort, and that is Reverend Edward Pinkney of Benton Harbor, Michigan, who is in the front line. He is in the trenches, in the front line of the trenches, fighting the fascist Governor Snyder of Michigan and his emergency manager law, and fighting the idea of sending these dictators, these little Hitlers, who are sent to run Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Ecorse, Detroit school system, and they'd be in Detroit already, except that the Detroit mayor and city council allowed this to happen really behind the scenes. So if you're in Michigan, vote yes on statewide proposals A and B. Statewide proposal A, should there be a referendum on the emergency manager law? Yes. Should there, on proposal B, should there be a right to collective bargaining in the state of Michigan? Yes. This is worth more than just about any other vote. Certainly, if you're in Michigan, this is the vote that counts for sure, because this is one vote where the Democratic Party is not getting in the way. It's a little bit like Ohio last year, right? When Ohio was asked, should the anti-union, union-busting measures of the fascist Kasich be rolled back, the answer to that was yes, resounding yes. And Kasich received a decisive rebuff, and he was shaken. But, of course, he's come back with his lunatic ideology since. He got an infusion of money, or was it formaldehyde, to stiffen his backbone. So in the case of Michigan, there's every reason to think that these initiatives can work, because you won't have somebody like Mayor Barrett of Milwaukee getting in the way, a treacherous, sleazy Democratic hack Paul coming out as the candidate after all that work. So Michigan is one of the key things. Watch Michigan on Tuesday evening, and above all, in the meantime, get the word out. Get the Twitter army going. We need a Twitter barrage in favor of Michigan. Vote yes on statewide proposals A and B. Fight fascism in Michigan. And this is very direct, because you'll recall the coup d'etat in Prussia of July 1932, where the social democratic regime is ousted by von Papen by now. Von Papen, this is after Brüning. Von Papen sets up an austerity dictatorship in Prussia. This is now the tendency. So if it can happen in Benton Harbor and these other places, it can happen in Michigan. If it happens in Michigan, it can happen in the United States. That's the path to dictatorship. Notice our dear friends, our wonderful heroes, the libertarians, they can't see this coming. They're focused on what happens with the TSA in the airport or some other drama of our time, rather than seeing the concrete jackboots of fascism marching in Michigan, step by step, out in the open, very public, and no way to mistake what's going on there. So we'll get to Reverend Pinkney in a minute, but now we're gonna talk about Benghazi and the CIA Mormon Mafia. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America, Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. Get it from ProgressivePress.com, ProgressivePress.com, Palm Desert, California, and it'll be on its way, and it can be in your hands within hours or minutes with the electronic ebook, which you can get for a mere $6, the price of a latte. How can you not have this? It's a tragedy not to have this for 6 measly Rasputniks. So now, the Benghazi story. This is a big news this morning, and it's interesting in itself. It's important in itself, and it's also important because all the CIA supporters are coming out of the woodwork to agitate now for Romney. People who are coming out of the woodwork now to agitate for Romney are showing their true colors. Now, the orientation we have here is a plague on both your houses. Stop Romney, stop Obama, do it with the United Front against austerity. Who should you vote for? You should support Proposition A and B, statewide proposal A and B in Michigan. There are a couple of others. I'll give you suggestions on protest votes for the presidential campaign later on. But no to both of them. And I am always appalled by the really stupid American attitude towards elections. It's not like getting married. It's not a declaration of principle. You don't have to regard it as a choice of world outlook. It's purely tactical. It's an area of grave corruption. And you can certainly say a plague on both your houses and then look around for some protest candidate who gives you some bang for the buck. And let me just anticipate who it might be. You look at these third-party candidates. Who do we have? Jill Stein of the Green Party. Well, not so great. We have Rocky Anderson of the Justice Party. This is a thinly veiled Mormon attempt to suck votes away from Obama and help Romney in some states. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian Party. This is essentially Ron Paul. Genocidal austerity against the American people, absolutely to be rejected. And then we have Virgil Goode, who is also he may qualify, I guess, as he's strong in Southwest Virginia, and he might have some effect in hurting Romney in Virginia. But none of these is acceptable. The one person in this entire array who has shown some character, and this is not in the way of an endorsement of anybody's program. Sherry Honkola, you heard here on this program about a year ago. She was running for sheriff of Philadelphia, and she showed some guts. She showed some fighting spirit. Sherry Honkola said, "Elect me sheriff of Philadelphia, and there won't be any more foreclosures because I will refuse to carry them out." There's an example of fighting spirit and true populism and true concern for the masses that I haven't seen from any of these others. So if you want to have a sentimental favorite, maybe it ought to be Sherry Honkola, vice presidential candidate for the Green Party. Unfortunately, there you have to hold your nose with the other people on that ticket. And, of course, this does not endorse the Malthusianism and the anti-science, anti-technology, and pro-green jobs flim-flam of the Green Party. There's also Roseanne Barr and her running mate who appeared, Cindy Sheehan, at the United Front Against Austerity. That's, I guess, in some places that might be of interest to some. But again, the one person who's actually done something in the right direction in the crisis, Sherry Honkola. So think about her. But other than that, this is obviously only a protest vote. In other words, the negative features of the program don't matter so much as the opportunity to register a protest vote. So in some areas you can do that. Now let's look at Benghazi, and you know the answer to this already. The CIA Mormon Mafia. Any analysis of Benghazi that doesn't start, middle, and end with CIA Mormon Mafia is a cover-up. Now, you know the basic outlines. The film is important, yes, indeed. The film caused demonstrations in Egypt and Pakistan in 25 cities all around the world, 25 countries, I guess it must be, and created the atmosphere in which this stunt could be pulled off. And that's done by the Islamophobia Network, by Nasrallah, leading to the Islamophobia group, and then to Bolton, likely Secretary of State for Romney. So that's one side of it. And we've talked about Kumu coming out of Guantanamo Bay, obvious U.S. double agent, obvious CIA asset, killing the ambassador with his group. The ambassador, of course, was there, unfortunately, to negotiate fighters and weapons from these al-Qaeda groups in the Benghazi, Derna, Tobruk terror axis that I warned you about a year and a half ago and more. That's what he was doing. He didn't think there was any threat to him because these are the people he'd been dealing with. He'd been paying them. They were also buying weapons, I suppose. That's another cover story. The cover story from David Ignatius on the radio this morning that Ambassador Stevens was there to open a library is laughable in the extreme. It was a library of Kalashnikovs that he was opening up one way or another. So he was there, and then the people that were supposed to provide security. Well, one was the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, the CIA asset which they had used to kill General Yunus to secure the victory of their favorite General Haftar as head of the Libyan forces. So they had done yeoman service for the CIA. But now that CIA annex that the Mormon Congressman Chaffetz was so worried about showing in those hearings a couple of weeks ago, where he freaked out and wanted the State Department to take down the overhead picture, which came from commercial images, like Google Earth or whatever it was. This CIA station and their failure to intervene has been prominent in the news coverage. Now, the way this started was on October 26th. We have Jennifer Griffin of Fox News, of all places, writes in exclusive, CIA operators were denied requests for help during Benghazi attack, sources say. And she says, Fox News has learned from sources who were on the ground in Benghazi that an urgent request from the CIA annex for military backup during the attack on the U.S. consulate and subsequent attacks several hours later on the annex itself was denied by the CIA chain of command. Denied by the CIA chain of command. Not the White House, not even Hillary Clinton, the CIA chain of command, who also told the CIA operators twice to stand down rather than help the ambassador's team. More in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Go back to World Crisis Radio. Get your copy of Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America with Polygamy, Theocracy, and Subversion. So, back on October 26th, we have Jennifer Griffin of Fox News reporting that the CIA chain of command denied the Benghazi consulate, and it's really emerging as more of a CIA office, a CIA consulate than a State Department consulate. The CIA chain of command denied permission to this CIA team, which is up to 12 people. These are special forces. These are the tough guys. The CIA chain of command says no, and told the CIA operatives to stand down rather than help the ambassador's team when shots were heard at approximately 9:40 p.m. on September 11th. So it's really only Fox News that pushes this, and they push it because they think they're helping Romney. But now the difference is, David Ignatius here in the Washington Post, November 1st, the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi is a political football, but Jennifer Griffin of Fox News has raised important questions that the CIA officers in Benghazi had been told to stand down when they wanted to deploy from their base at the annex to repel the attack on the consulate. And that then leads today, the news of today, November 2nd, is, now we're on the front page of today's Washington Post. We're told that the CIA has published a timeline. The CIA timeline says that help was on the way to the beleaguered consulate within 25 minutes. Well, this is a lot of baloney. This is a cover-up, and it's a cover-up for the CIA Mormon Mafia. What Jennifer Griffin has stumbled on, mark my words, Jennifer Griffin has stumbled on a true story. She doesn't understand what she's dealing with. These are not orders coming from Obama. This is ridiculous. It's the CIA Mormon mafia in the CIA chain of command that issued the stand-down order for exactly the reason that I told you within the first few days after the attack, to get an October surprise already in September and to use that to cauterize Obama. Now, it's not working. You can see how angry these reactionaries are that this does not have traction, partly because the economic situation is so desperate. People simply do not have time and energy for issues other than their own survival. But you get the idea with this. It is the CIA Mormon Mafia. Now, we've also got the subsidiary story that Tyrone Woods, former Navy SEAL, was killed in the process, and his father has made some very intemperate statements. So, of course, he's a bereaved father. On Fox News, of course, talking to Sean Hannity. Who else? Charles Woods, the father of the slain CIA contractor, says that the people who, he says, White House officials, well, it's not White House officials, who ordered no help for the embattled CIA annex. They were cowards, and they're guilty of murdering my son. Well, I'm afraid if you want to blame somebody, you've got to blame General David Petraeus. General David Petraeus, the head of the CIA, has ministerial responsibility. So you want to get somebody, get General David Petraeus. He's responsible. And if you want to take it to the State Department side, it is indeed Hillary Clinton. There is ministerial responsibility. Something goes wrong in your ministry, you are out, not the head of government or the head of state. But now, this is the point at which all the pro-Romney forces are attempting to mobilize, Fox News, Hannity, but also LaRouche, the Amen Corner of the CIA. He's going to be at the press club today, we're told, trying to sell the version that Obama is personally micromanaging everybody in Benghazi. Now, of course, it's a funny story because on the one side they say he doesn't care, he's off campaigning, and the other side is he micromanages everything. Well, which is it? Glenn Beck, another well-known Mormon activist, a strident apologist for Mormonism, if there ever was one. You can read about a couple of things about him in my book, Bishop Romney, Just Too Weird. Glenn Beck says that he's got some secret document that will prove that Obama is the one who did it. In the meantime, Glenn Beck is shouting that the Western way of life, Western civilization, is at stake in this election. Yes, in order to save Western civilization, we've got to put in a candidate who comes from a tradition of polygamy and theocracy and racism and secessionism. Just what we need. And, of course, antinomianism. If we're going to count the heresies, the antinomian heresy, no laws, do what you want. The Pelagian heresy, that you make your own destiny, there's no role for grace or divine providence, nothing like this. In religion, this is an important concept. And the Arian heresy, which is that Christ is just a guy like you. Or, I mean, God is just, it's an ultra-Arian heresy. And we're told by Glenn Beck that if Romney is not elected, the world will weep. Well, you look at the polls in Europe, of course, the world doesn't seem to be weeping for Romney. Also, we've got Joel Skousen, eminent Mormon activist, telling us that Romney is not part of the establishment. Romney is not a conspirator. Romney is a maverick. He's potential trouble for those guys. He's smart. He is like Ronald Reagan. He has principles. He's very ambitious. He won't be controllable by them. This, of course, is extremely dubious as an analysis. And we've got a whole bunch of people who they're still focused on Obama. They're really only 4 years behind now, right? They were focused on Bush when Obama came along, and now that Romney comes along, they're still focused on Obama. So this is the situation. I think if you look at Glenn Beck is the face of Mormon political activism. That is what the Mormon hierarchy actually thinks. The Mormon hierarchy that gave you Ezra Taft Benson, who said that Martin Luther King was a communist, civil rights was communism, and it was time to get rid of all of those people. Now, this is the immediate focus. So, this entire operation depends on the cowardice of the Obama White House. If the Obama White House had the guts to send people out, and they could do this through cutouts, to say CIA Mormon Mafia, that would blow the lid off this thing. It's only the stubborn silence, the prevarication of the Obama White House that lets this go on. Now, in line with this, let's do a couple of other foreign policy items before we go further. The Syrian government, there's going to be a conference in Qatar next week where the State Department and the CIA are going to present their new puppet council for Syria. Remember the Iraqi government in a box? Now we have the Syrian government in exile in a box. A new puppet council, and Hillary Clinton, traveling in the Balkans, says that the difference of the new puppet council compared to the old puppet council, which was the Syrian National Council, that is being junked because of their squabbles. She says it's time for a new puppet council in which the fighters, the killers, the death squads have more representation. And as some people have commented with some irony, the State Department is now looking high and low for fighters who are also pro-democracy, liberal activists. It's a complete fraud. Ambassador Ford, the expert in these matters when it comes to death squads, very knowledgeable, he's going to be present in Qatar next week, so they're going to launch that. It's a sign of desperation, as I had occasion to point out. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, let's look briefly at the outcome of the Hurricane Sandy tragedy in New Jersey and New York. First of all, what we're obviously dealing with is an attempt by ruling class media to sell us the fake philosophy of communitarianism. Communitarianism. It's associated with Amitai Etzioni and others. Communitarianism is when Obama embraces Christie, a Wall Street Democrat embracing a reactionary or indeed proto-fascist Republican, the Garden State Girling, as we've called him. That's supposed to warm your heart. And all these fussy, gullible independents, these flighty characters, they are enjoying the spectacle of communitarianism. Communitarianism means we're all in this together. Well, yes and no. The idea is to set up communitarianism on the one side and Ayn Rand and the reactionary Republican outlook on the other, sort of modern Nietzschean wolf eats wolf, dog eats dog, war of all against all. Both of these are bankrupt. The communitarian, we're all in the same boat. Yeah, right. You and Bloomberg are all in the same boat. And the other side, of course, the Ayn Rand, which we've often criticized here, right, which is out and out fascism. Communitarianism is not populism, and it is not class defense. What we're interested in here is class defense, that we do not have common interests with Bloomberg. He is a Wall Street parasite, and with Christie is a reactionary Republican, a desperate demagogue trying to get reelected, which is not normally a home to such somebody as reactionary as he is. So what are we going to have next? Obama and Boner united in the struggle? No, I'm sorry. This is no good. Populism and class defense trump communitarianism. But now what should happen? The problem pointed up by the events around the hurricane is the lack of infrastructure and the weakness of the now 100-year-old subway system and the New York City tunnels, the Queens Midtown Tunnel, Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, other tunnels that have flooded, and the substation of Consolidated Edison that blew up 14th Street and Avenue A on the Lower East Side. What should be done? Well, here's a program. These are the bare bones of a recovery program for this region. We need to rebuild the stricken areas, obviously, but we've got to modernize at the same time. Don't just rebuild it the way it is, but modernize it. So here's what I would recommend. First of all, a total debt freeze on all debt in the stricken area. In other words, all payments on mortgages and other things have to be frozen, and whatever damage this does to individual lenders, this can be addressed by the federal government and even better by the Federal Reserve, as I'll try to point out. But you've got to have a debt freeze in these areas. You've got to put out a binding executive order under the state of emergency, which you now have, right? This is all a state of emergency. So once you have a state of emergency, that's not just to deliver bottled water. You can take sweeping emergency measures. No foreclosures for 5 years or the duration of the rebuilding process. No foreclosures on primary residences, to be sure, for individuals living in those primary residences. And the way to organize a lot of the emergency aid is by 0% 100-year credit from a nationalized window at, I hope, a nationalized Federal Reserve. Now, you'll notice that when Obama comes in there, he has signed executive orders that will make available federal disaster relief loans at subsidized interest rates. Now, this is Treasury money, and the interest rate is somewhat lower than the market. We'll check exactly what the interest rate is. But it should be down to almost zero. The emergency loans for rebuilding should be the 0% century bonds, century loans issued by the Federal Reserve. In other words, I would say look at this crisis and say, what is the Federal Reserve, the great Federal Reserve, what are they contributing to disaster relief in the wake of Hurricane Sandy? Everybody else is supposedly mobilized, right? The state, the federal government, FEMA, and all this. How about the Federal Reserve? The Treasury, of course, cash grants from the Treasury, those have to be maintained, and those come from the Treasury, and that's on budget. That's, in other words, it's part of the federal budget one way or another. It should not be subjected to the sabotage and obstructionism of the Tea Party proto-fascists in the Republican House delegation. Forget them. It's a state of emergency. You can use emergency funds to do this. That's the point of having a state of emergency. It's got to be done fast. Present those guys with a fait accompli, and if they want to go out on a limb and try to organize some move to repeal it later on, fine. But U.S. history is full of examples where the president gets out in front, takes the actions, and the Congress is then asked to validate them after the fact. And that is what ought to be done now. Don't ask Senator Lee of Utah, or don't ask little Rand Paul whether he thinks that this money should be granted. He'll say, no, too bad for them. Why did they choose to live there? And that's what they always say. If it's Katrina and the Gulf Coast, too bad for them. Why did they live there? Now it's too bad for them. Why did they live there? Well, you've got to have the Port of New York. Sorry, you've got to have it. That's a national interest. You've got to have the Port of New Orleans. That's a national interest. Even the Port of Galveston is a national interest for the sake of the Ron Paul people. So, debt freeze to the greatest extent possible, no foreclosures on primary residences, 0% federal disaster relief, and what this ought to be used for is great projects of infrastructure. Isn't it time now to rebuild the New York City subway? It is more than 100 years old. 100 years old. Isn't it time, since Governor Christie has seen the light, to build that new tunnel under the Hudson River that we need? Isn't it time to rebuild the Tappan Zee Bridge? Tappan Zee Bridge, 16 to $20 billion needed there. The waterproofing of the subways is another $20 billion. But don't just waterproof these ancient structures now, these 100-year-old structures. Rebuild them. Go beyond the French RER, right, the high-speed trains that get you from one side of Paris to another, right? Get some super modern maglev, if possible, and certainly fast rail going on in New York City. Start rebuilding the underground infrastructure of the city of New York using those 100-year, 0% federal loans. Force the Federal Reserve to do it. We've got to get control of the Federal Reserve. If we had a real president, he could make one phone call and say, Bernanke, you will do this, or I will put a row of tanks in front of your office. And the 101st Airborne will come in and escort you to your summer home. And if you don't do that, though, a mass movement could dictate to the Fed saying, Bernanke, cough up $1 trillion of 0% century bonds to rebuild the city of New York, state of New Jersey, Connecticut, all the areas, right? Because the entire Atlantic coast got slammed. In other words, it's time for massive upgrades of this antiquated infrastructure, which is always on the edge of collapse. And more broadly, one of the problems of civilization is to have a sufficient social surplus so that you can deal with unpredictable emergencies, which always occur. And the problem is that the U.S. economy has no surplus. It has a negative net profit. We've got to go back to having a positive net profit for the entire U.S. economy. Back in a minute. Welcome back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Now, we talked at the beginning about the very successful United Front Against Austerity, which was held in New York City last Saturday. And I'm very honored today to be able to present one of the speakers who contributed, I think, a great sense of, okay, I'm told that we have a technical problem, but we will be, in a minute, we're going to go to Benton Harbor, Michigan, and we're going to talk to Reverend Edward Pinkney. This was one of the highlights of the United Front Against Austerity that was held in New York City last Saturday. Very successful meeting, some excellent speakers, and my trying to give you summaries. You can go to the dedicated YouTube channel. Go to Against Austerity UFAA, and I think by clicking there you can find your way to the YouTube channel, and there you can get it all. And Reverend Pinkney spoke to us by telephone. He also did some question and answer, and what it comes down to is this. On Election Day in the state of Michigan, you will get a chance to vote on, the usual slates, nationwide, president, federal officers, other posts. But you'll also have the ability to answer some ballot proposals. Statewide proposals A and B. Proposal A says, should there be a referendum on the emergency manager law? And the answer is yes, there should be, and that will be the first step towards repealing that odious piece of legislation. Statewide proposal B is, should there be the right of collective bargaining in Michigan? And the answer to that is emphatically yes. Now, you'll notice that the National Democratic Party, Obama, people like this, haven't done very much about it. I've been looking at Jennifer Granholm, former governor of Michigan, on current TV, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't watch it every night, but doesn't look like she's too much mobilized for this either. But that's the Democratic Party for you. But here's your chance to do it directly yourself. So we're happy to be in a united front with Reverend Edward Pinkney that we hope to get. And let's see if do we have him? I guess we still don't. All right, so you get the... Okay, we're still having technical problems. Let me just point out now, from the United Front Against Austerity, our basic guideline is between now and the election to agitate to call attention to this Michigan A and B, statewide proposals A and B. Stop the emergency manager law of Governor Snyder and reassert the right to collective bargaining. On November 8th, right after the election, 2 days thereafter, there is a call from the AFL-CIO to hold some kind of anti-austerity event against the grand bargain. This is Trumpka doing this. Now, of course, we don't expect the AFL-CIO to be very energetic about this, especially not before the election. They're trying to get you to vote for Obama on November 6th so that they can then go out and agitate against him on November 8th. We're going to do it the whole time. Anti-austerity is our plank. No cuts to anything of interest to working people, no to the grand bargain, and pay for it with the Wall Street sales tax, which the AFL-CIO, in a separate part of their website, endorses. So we want the Wall Street sales tax, and we want a general strike on that. And from now to Christmas, we want to agitate to stop the grand bargain with the Wall Street sales tax. But now, we're honored to go to Benton Harbor, Michigan. Edward Pinkney, Reverend Pinkney, is one of the leaders of the statewide effort that has succeeded by gathering hundreds of thousands of signatures to get this on the ballot. And, of course, he's been fighting that austerity dictator that was sent in by the governor in Benton Harbor. So we want to get a report from him. Welcome, Reverend, and please tell us what the struggle looks like where you are.
Well, you know, this struggle is I tell you, it's a tremendous struggle. But we're waking up the people because they understand how serious this matter is. See, we are the very first city in the whole United States that actually have a dictator. So that is one of the reasons why we're getting people to the polls. See, my group, which is BANCO, the Black Autonomy Network Community Organization, we're going to be responsible for taking more than 10,000 people to the polls for this election. And what I want to do, I want to make sure people out there understand how important it is for you to get to the polls. You must go out and vote, regardless what it looks like. Don't say it doesn't mean anything. It means a lot. So I'm asking every single person that's listening to this show to get out and vote. Take a person. Take 2 people. Take 3 people. Take them. And to me, that's important because here in the city of Benton Harbor, we have the very first dictator in the history of the United States. Let me tell you some of the things that he have done already. The first thing he did, he terminated our mayor, fired him, took his desk and placed it in the basement, let him know who was in power. Then he told the commissioners that you could no longer go into the office and do any work. He took their keys. Then he took their cell phone. But we're fighting back. We went out and got 226,000 signatures to repeal this bill. It all falls under Public Act 4. You can look it up on the internet, Public Act 4. And how it got to be Public Act 4, you remember this, that it was House Bill 4214, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then it became Senate Bill 153, 154, all the way to 158. And once the governor signed it, it became Public Act 4. And I tell you, you do not want that bill in your community, but it's coming if we do not stand up and fight it. This is something that people need to talk about. We need to take the time out and explain to people what's coming to our community. And we have to go out and fight. So whatever you do, you get out and vote. Take your mother, take your sister, take your wife. Take people to vote. Whether you like it or not, this is crucial. It's not just for you, but it's for the future of your children, which to me is the most important thing.
Thank you, Reverend. Now, I'd just like to give people a little bit more of an idea of what it's like when the dictator comes to town and what sorts of decisions have been made. I understand that there's a public park on Lake Michigan, which is a very nice recreational place, and that they're trying to seize that and sell it to some of Snyder's rich friends and
Absolutely.
Make it into some gentrified palace for the super rich?
Absolutely. And what they have done, they have took the land from the beach. It's called Gene Clark Park. You can look it up. And what they have done, they have built these $1 million homes right on our beach and made it off limits to us. Matter of fact, the we call him the emergency manager. What he has done, he had made the beach off limits to the residents of Benton Harbor. And from September to May, the park is closed. That means you cannot go on the beach. You cannot do anything. And starting May 1st, you can go to the park, but you can't enter the park until after 11 a.m., and the park closed once again at 8 a.m. That's because the residents that lives on the beach, on our land, do not want the residents of Benton Harbor on the beach. And you got to remember this. The residents of Benton Harbor is something like, it's over 65% of the people that live in Benton Harbor are unemployed. 90% live below the poverty level. They won't tell you these wonderful things, but they will. The emergency manager, one of the things that he have done, he have placed our radio station on eBay. That's right. He placed the radio station on eBay.
Hang on, Reverend, hang on. That's our music. It's a hard break. We'll be right back with Reverend Pinckney in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. We're very happy to be talking with Reverend Edward Pinckney of Benton Harbor, Michigan. He represents the Black Autonomy Network community organization. That's BANCO, B-A-N-C-O, working for economic and social justice in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Just telling us something about these activities or what it's like to live under a dictator. When a dictator comes to town, kicks out the mayor and the city council, and begins issuing orders, what does that look like? Please continue, Reverend.
And yeah, let me say this, in order to understand, this guy, he sets rules, and everything else, democracy ceases. Collective bargaining is stopped. Public discord is minimized. Local elected officials are all stripped of their duties. That's both for everybody. An emergency manager can remove elected officials from office, disperse all state, federal, and local funds with no oversight. He can do whatever he wants with the revenue. He can subpoena witnesses. He compels the production of paper. He controls all local contracts, not just some, all. He creates new positions, and he fills vacancy at the expense of the local. Here's the deal, which is so important. What he normally do, he outsources all the jobs in the community and bring in his friends, and they control this city. He can reject, terminate any contract. He can sell off local government property. He can borrow millions and millions of dollars under the name of the city of Benton Harbor and put the city even in worse debt. Right now, we are worse off now than we have ever been before. He's selling plots of land for $1 to Whirlpool. Whirlpool is buying up all the land in the city of Benton Harbor. They tried to change the name from Benton Harbor to Harbor Shores. And also, don't forget, we have this Jack Nicklaus signature golf course in a community that has over 70% of its people unemployed, 90% living below the poverty level. And this Jack Nicklaus golf course, it costs $5,000 per year just to be a member. So we have some major issues here. And I tell you, you do not want an emergency manager in your community. Anytime you give a man this much power, he has more power actually than the president himself. Because the president had to go to the Senate. This guy can do whatever he chooses to do. Here's something he did. He terminated all the police officers in the community. He terminated all the firemen in the community. And what he did, he merged the two. Even though they don't have training to be a police officer, he made a fireman a policeman, and the policeman a fireman who didn't have that type of training. This is some of the stuff that we're going through right now. I mean, it's so incredible when you think about it. As a matter of fact, he won't even let the city council have a meeting without his permission. He said, you can have a meeting. You can have a meeting, but you can't make any decision. So what we do, we still have meetings anyway, and we make resolutions, and he usually knock them down. He said no. He'll say, when he say no, is no. He said is everybody in the city voted for something, and he voted against it, he wins. This is a real true dictator. This is.
Let me ask you now. I'm sure people are wondering, how can they help you? What can people do that are outside of Michigan? Can they contribute? Do you need volunteers? Tell us about contributions and volunteers.
Absolutely. We need volunteers. You can contact me at Banco, B-A-N-C-O, at 1940 Union, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. Let me repeat that. That's Banco, B-A-N-C-O, 1940, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022, or you can call me at 269-925-0001. That's 269-925-0001. Anything that you can do. We need volunteers, but we also need resources. Anything that you may be able to send, we appreciate it. We are in need of funds to continue this fight against this emergency manager, this dictator who is controlling our community. So that is very, very, very important. And one other thing, make sure you get out and vote. Please, that's truly important to me.
Reverend, if they want to send money, where should they send it again?
They can send it to Banco, B-A-N-C-O, 1940 Union Street, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. That's Banco, B-A-N-C-O, 1940 Union, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022, or they can call me at 269-925-0001.
That's I think very important. People should do that. Reverend, one other thing. Who is this guy? What's his name? What's his background?
Name is Joseph Harris. And believe me, he's about as arrogant as a man can get.
Joseph Harris.
That's correct. His name is Joseph Harris.
And where does he come from?
He can come from Detroit.
But is he a blue blood? Is he a?
He's a black man, and with the attitude that is so incredible. Here's something. If you got the time, I want to tell you one quick story. If
go ahead quickly,
because this is very important. Whirlpool controls this area, and they controls him. So what happened was $168,000 was missing, and he thought that the commissioners had taken the money. So he calls in the FBI. He has that much power to call in the FBI to do a complete investigation of this $168,000. Well, the FBI came up with the idea that the money was taken by Cornerstone Alliance, which is a subdivision of Whirlpool. Whirlpool got mad. They went to the governor. They said a CEO, their vice president, state representative Al Pachoka, and one guy from the city to tell the governor that they want Mr. Harris to leave our community because they have violated them, not the citizens, but they have violated this corporation, which makes this so important. This is how much power. But here's what he did. He neutralized them by becoming a whistleblower. So if they removed him, he would blow the whistle on all the things they've been doing. So that's why he's still here today.
Let me ask you one other thing. We have similar dictators in Flint and Pontiac and Ecorse and the Detroit school system. Are you in touch with them?
Yes, I am. We're all connected.
All right, wonderful. I got to go now. Thank you so much, Reverend. You've given us what to do. We're going to do it. We'll be in touch soon. Good luck on next Tuesday.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Well, that's Reverend Pinckney, and that's the struggle in Michigan, and I think that ought to be a prime focus from now to the election to November 6th. So, time for Twitter barrage. Support Michigan Proposition A and B. Get out there and vote, as the Reverend said. Contribute to BANCO, 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 1940 Union Street, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022, if I heard this correctly. And let me see if I can put this on my website, or we'll put it on the UFAA website as well. So there's a focus. Now, the other question is the AFL-CIO and their planned some kind of an action, I'm sure low-key, on November 8th, anti-austerity, anti-grand bargain. And again, why not put that together with what they also support, which is the Wall Street sales tax? Get the Wall Street sales tax up front, make it 1%, but even if they don't make it 1%, we can be there demanding 1%, and put this into the form of a call for a general strike sometime in late November, December, when this austerity package is going to be put forward by Obama and by these reactionary Republicans and by a whole bunch of lame duck congressmen who are going to be on their way to cushy, well-paid jobs in Wall Street, joining the 1% that way. So if and when the federal government, Obama, Boner, decide they want to roll back the economic rights of the American people, answer that with a general strike and make clear that there is a way to pay for it, that Wall Street pays no tax. We have a New York Times article here from Friday, October 26th. Business leaders open to tax increase, push for a deficit deal. Yeah, but they're not talking about the tax we want. We want the Wall Street sales tax, 1% on every transaction and on all their turnover. From now to Christmas, the goal is stop the grand bargain, stop austerity, preserve the economic rights of the American people, no cuts. Wall Street sales tax is the only way. And I think we don't want the extension of the payroll tax cut. Why don't you do a return to the making work pay tax credit? It was $800 worth of tax credit for two people. Why don't we increase that? Why don't we get that up to $1,000 per person, and therefore $2,000 for two wage earners? That would be, I think, a better step. And, of course, remove the cap on Social Security. That's the other obvious thing. Let the richies pay the same payroll tax on all of their income. Stop this from being such a regressive tax and make it into at least a proportional tax, which should be progressive, but make it proportional will be a step in the right direction. Now, concerning what went on at the UFAA, the main question is how the issue that generated controversy in the afternoon, after wonderful speeches by all of the speakers, and again, you can see them at the dedicated YouTube channel, was how does the United Front actually work? You don't start a United Front by bargaining away your principles and your program. Your goal is not to reach immediate unanimity on program. It's to plan concrete, specific actions of the kind that I propose. Fight for Michigan, intervene into the AFL-CIO, and above all, fight the grand bargain. The three things that I just ran into. What you do, if it's the peace movement, if it's Jobs for All, if it's any other group, you say, we want to propose to you a concrete action. Have a demonstration at this time, at this address. How many people can you put into the field? How many tweets can you generate? What can you do? It's very concrete. It's not, we're going to change our program to make you like us at the beginning. That's a sellout. That's unprincipled. And you don't want to do it. Especially, I'm afraid we had this program from the Jobs for All Coalition. I will do a detailed critique of that next week. There's just no time now before the presidential election. But the Jobs for All people came forward with a program which ignores the issue of the Federal Reserve, does not talk about production, does not really talk about infrastructure, is very much oriented towards really putting people on the federal payroll when this is not necessary, and the strains on the federal budget will be great. I don't think they learned the lessons of Lend-Lease. They're back in the WPA, and you may need a WPA, but that should not be the whole story. And the stumbling block came when should 30 million federal jobs be created with the help of the Wall Street sales tax and seizing the Federal Reserve. Should that be done directly or indirectly? And they say, no, it has to be only direct. It has to be directly on the federal payroll. Well, no. It can also be done through the states and through private contractors. But no, that's not radical enough. That might actually happen. That is politically much more feasible. And we have one guy there from Nebraska, and he said, if you go into some place in Omaha and say, let's put 25 million people on the federal payroll, the skepticism will be great. But if you say the governor of Nebraska is going to have several $billion, quite a few $1 billion, to put out contracts for infrastructure, right, for building the transcontinental super high-speed maglev rail through Nebraska, then support could occur. So the problem with the Jobs for All critique, the program, is that it's scientifically inadequate, doesn't address the Federal Reserve, and it doesn't really seem to understand that if you're going to seize the Federal Reserve, that allows you to work through states, the private sector, other authorities, all of these entities that you want to draw in to a political power cartel to make these things happen, rather than to sit in the left isolation of Lower Manhattan, where I guess these ideas seem to be more plausible. But unfortunately, there's that great big space out there where they're not. So, but it's scientifically inadequate that you will not get a sustained recovery unless you seize the Federal Reserve and start issuing credit for production to the private sector, yes, indeed, and to states for infrastructure and to private contractors. And ultimately, it's a reductio ad absurdum, because ultimately you're going to have to go to the private sector to buy things, even if the people are not themselves on the private sector contractor payroll. And so it's scientifically and politically deeply flawed. We'll talk about this again. But the thing to do with other organizations, if you want to have a united front, is to propose concrete steps. The AFL-CIO says, come on November 8th and be anti-austerity and anti-grand bargain. Great. You go there and you put out the Wall Street sales tax and the general strike. How many people are you going to deliver? This also has the benefit of bringing your rank and file together with the rank and file of others, and if your rank and file know what they're doing, they can actually interact with the rank and file of the others and get an actual programmatic dialogue going. So we don't need formalism now. We need action. And above all, you need to look at people that have actually contributed something to this. It's nice for people to have opinions, but some of these opinions are essentially opinions offered by those with no skin in the game or very little skin in the game. People who come from other issues and other directions and who maybe aren't going to change. If they are going to change, that's great. And then they acquire a voice, but only to the extent that they begin to actually take part in these concrete actions and turn out their base for these concrete actions. That's some idea of some thoughts after this meeting. So now we're going to get back now with our last segment before the election and give you some election analysis. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. All right, now here's the election rundown. The main goal is divided government. The hell that we do not want is to go back to Bush in the first 2 years of the Bush regime, the years that brought you 9/11 and the Iraq War. If the Republicans control the presidency, the House, and the Senate, this is what is to be avoided at all costs. So, above all, in elections, do what you can to preserve divided government. We do not share the communitarian outlook. We are not interested in bipartisan compromises. Bipartisan compromises are Malthusian genocide for the American people, killer austerity and killer cuts. That's the only conceivable bipartisanship that has been brought forward. Rather, our task is to get in between them and make them fight over principled issues where we might be able to get some kind of a response from the Democrats in defense of the New Deal, given the fact that 2/3 to 3/4 to 4/5 of the American people want the economic reforms of the New Deal. They want their economic rights. The fascisto Republicans are determined to wipe these out. And if the Democratic Party gives up on this, they are destroying themselves, because that's the only way they get votes. They do not get votes sufficiently on the basis of their identity politics groups. So preserve divided government. Given the dynamic of this, if Romney wins the presidency, it's probably associated with Republican takeover of the Senate and therefore a return to a one-party totalitarian-style regime. This we do not want. So govern yourself accordingly. Now, the other big question is vote fraud. Vote fraud. We are dealing with Karl Rove. Who is Karl Rove? I call him a crypto-Mormon. He comes from Salt Lake City. He claims he's not a Mormon, but he imbibed the antinomianism, the everything is permitted, right? The lawlessness, the moral anomie of those precincts. That's who you're dealing with. And Tag Romney, who seems to control the voting machines in about 20 states. Beware vote fraud. Vote fraud coming big time. I don't say voter fraud. That's done by petty criminals for no consequence, to earn a few bucks perhaps. We're talking election fraud. We're talking vote fraud, computer-generated using election machines of the type you saw in Ohio in 2004. Look up the Fitrakis research. Look at the current issue of Harper's Magazine. I recommended it, the article there about how to steal an election. This will be a close election. It is stealable. Last time, 2008, was not stealable. Obama was too far ahead. Undoubtedly, they did what they could. The figures you see reflect what vote fraud could do. It could not deliver the election for McCain. As that Harper's article says, vote fraud favors Republicans. That's the way it is. Now, remember, whatever the polls say, think back to 2004, the red shift comes into play. The red shift, not astronomy, but vote fraud and election fraud. This is where whatever the poll says, 2 to 3 to 4% are added into the Romney column. So this is the principal danger. So as the Reverend says, get out and vote. Throw your vote, at least, into the scales against this colossal fraud. Notice also the Democratic Party, craven, gutless, cowardly, eager to surrender. They're not going to fight. Gore didn't fight. Gore was falling all over himself to surrender. Kerry surrendered, and Obama is of the same type. The Wall Street Democrat will not fight. Now, if Romney wins, what's it going to be? A permanent austerity dictatorship will be attempted. This is also Karl Rove's theory. Karl Rove, the crypto-Mormon, once again, and his 40-year Republican majority. It's going to be an attempt to limit the franchise, to de facto prevent people from voting. The Republican Party is demographically doomed, as we've pointed out. The fast-growing groups are the Hispanics, the Asian immigrants. One group that is shrinking are the reactionary white men upon whom the Republican Party depends. Their specific gravity in this population is dwindling. Therefore, if the Republicans cannot win this time and stay in power using these dirty tricks, their future is bleak. So they're going to say, voter ID. They're going to say, purge the election rolls, make it harder and harder to vote, no early voting, restrict absentee ballots, harass people, intimidate people. That's Karl Rove, once again. And Citizens United, massive influx of cash, foreign money, doesn't matter what it is, Cayman Islands, get it all in there by the election. And then, if you can have 1 or 2 Supreme Court nominees for Romney, a permanent reactionary majority in the Supreme Court, no more Kennedy swing vote, but solid reactionary, pre-constituted, fascistoid majority of co-thinkers of Scalia, as Scott Brown has told us. Maybe Scott Brown knows more than he says. So think of Orrin Hatch, the Mormon, or Mike Lee, the Mormon senator, as members of the Supreme Court. Not good, but that's what's going to be coming your way. So of course, the CIA Mormon mafia in the FBI and the CIA and the State Department, running wild along with the neocons, right, in a probable early Middle East war to begin the rehabilitation of the neocons the way they see it. Now, if Obama wins, we know from the Des Moines Register interview we talked about last time, the Des Moines Register interview, which indicates the grand bargain, trillions of dollars of killer austerity. However, parallel to that, you'll see the Republicans tend to dwindle. The Republicans will be shocked by this. If they can't win with all their money, if they can't take every branch with all that money, then their formula is in crisis, right? Their racist, reactionary, xenophobic, anti-immigrant formula is in trouble. And they'll know that. Probably at that point, the Rand Pauls and the other extremists will come forward and say, we were not reactionary enough. We needed to be more reactionary. That's what they've been saying the whole time. If they do that, and I hope they do, they will become what they really are, the Deep South racists of the Deep South of the old Confederacy, and they will become a regional party, and that could go very, very quickly. And with Obama attacking the ideological glue of the Republican Party, with Obama attacking the ideological glue of the Democratic Party, which are the entitlements, the New Deal reforms, the Democrats, I think, at that point might well split. Obama and the Wall Street Democrats, Schumer, Durbin, and the others on one side, and on the other side, a minority group, to be sure, Sherrod Brown, perhaps, Marcy Kaptur, DeFazio, others, right? The sort of populist of the Progressive Caucus, not the entire House Progressive Caucus. It's about 65 people, but maybe half of them, and that would already be the base of a third party. So the Democrats could split, and one of the things, if this goes the way I think it might, it will be our job to help them split, because they should split. They shouldn't remain as unprincipled congeries. So the party realignment, right? We haven't talked much about the party realignment. The party realignment is still pending, right? We know these cycles occur. 1896 to 1932 was a Republican cycle. 1932 to 1966 to 1968 was the Roosevelt New Deal Democratic cycle. 1968 to now essentially has been the reactionary Republican cycle with Reagan and Bush, and so forth. It's time for a permanent realignment in the Electoral College. If the Republicans are defeated now, it's possible that the growth of the Hispanic voting bloc and the continued racism and xenophobia of the Republicans will mean that places like Texas become purple states because of the Hispanics. That's more likely. Now, we're told that the Democrats would need 25 seats to take over the House. They won't get them. The House will remain Republican. And according to, I wish we had time to go through it, but according to Politico, it's likely that the Senate will remain just the way it is right now. The Senate is, it's 47, let me see again here. Anyway, the Republicans would need to take 4 seats. They won't get them. If Romney wins, they would need to take 3 seats. Chances are they won't get those, according to Politico. So it's likely that the Senate will remain as it is right now, according to Politico. And we had time, we would go through it. But I think we've said the most important things. Vote for divided government. Divided government. And we'll be back next